Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. On July 15, 2023, a quiet morning in a suburban Texas neighborhood, the silence was broken by the sound of police sirens. Inside the backyard of a well-appointed home, police discovered the body of Elena Rodriguez, a mother of two, lying motionless on the ground. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of forced entry. But strangely, the person who called the police, Daniel Herrera, the victim's husband, appeared to be unusually calm. Daniel said he walked out into the backyard this morning and was shocked to find his wife dead. It was a terrible shock, but there was something in his voice that made the police feel uneasy. There were no tears, no panic, just a standard, smooth tone, as if it had been prepared in advance. The police began to collect evidence, and the first clues quickly appeared. Elena's best friend revealed that just a few days ago, the victim had discovered a dark secret about her husband, a truth that could ruin everything. Did Elena know something that made her a threat? And if so, did that knowledge cost her her life? Let's dive into the details of this twisted case. Elena Rodriguez, 35, was a strong, devoted family woman who lived with her husband, Daniel Herrera, and their two young children in a quiet residential area in Texas. She had a life that many people would envy, a spacious house, a successful lawyer husband, and two adorable children. To their marriage, from the outside looked like the perfect picture of contentment and success. But in recent months, Elena had gradually realized that something was changing. Something invisible but deeply disturbing was creeping into her family life. Daniel was no longer the man she knew. He often came home late for vague reasons, sometimes for long meetings, sometimes for unexpected work events. If before he often shared with his wife about his work, now their conversations became short and fragmented. More worryingly, Daniel became more and more secretive with his phone. He no longer carelessly left it on the table like before, but always kept it close to him, even setting a password. Every time Elena entered the room unexpectedly, she saw her husband quickly turn off the screen or step away to answer the phone. These subtle changes might not have been enough for Elena to immediately draw conclusions, but instinctively she felt a growing unease. The distance between them was no longer accidental or temporary. Some nights Daniel would come home late, the scent of an unfamiliar perfume lingering on his shirt. Elena was not the type to be unreasonably jealous, but these signs were too much to ignore. She began to wonder, was the man she once trusted hiding something? And if so, what was it? Elena's suspicions were no longer vague premonitions when one afternoon in June, while Daniel was taking a shower, she accidentally saw her husband's phone screen light up with a message. The sender was Natalia Gomez, her biological mother. The message was short, but enough to make Elena's heart clench. "Honey, last night was great. I miss you." The feeling of dizziness hit her like a punch in the face. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. The lock screen asked for a password, but only a few seconds later the next message appeared. This time a red heart. Elena felt cold all over, her breath caught in her chest. The doubts she had been having for a long time suddenly became cruelly clear. She never imagined that the one who betrayed her would not only be her husband, but also her own mother. Her mind was spinning, but the reason of a strong and experienced woman quickly returned. This was not the time to lose control. She needed the truth, needed proof, needed to be sure that she was not misunderstanding something. Suppose it was just a coincidence, an accidentally sent message. But deep down, Elena knew that the truth rarely gave in. In the days that followed, she began to observe more closely. Every time Daniel left the house with the excuse of an urgent meeting, she secretly checked his schedule through his phone's location. Strangely, his device always signaled a signal at a hotel not far from home. She checked his emails, skimmed through his bank transactions, discovered suspicious expenses at fancy restaurants, expensive gifts she had never received. One evening, while Daniel was sleeping soundly, Elena took his phone and entered one of the passwords she had seen him use before. This time the screen turned on, and what appeared before her eyes completely destroyed any last hope. Months of messages from Natalia, words of love, secret dates, private photos that she should never have seen. The undeniable evidence painted a disgusting picture. The man she trusted the most, and the woman who gave birth to her, had betrayed her in the most cruel way. Elena felt like she was falling into a bottomless pit, where everything she knew about family, about happiness, was a lie. But in the midst of her pain, she tried to stay calm. Exploding now would not do any good. She needed time, needed precision. She could not let Daniel turn the tables, could not let him deny everything so easily. Elena began taking screenshots, saving all the messages, sending them to her personal email. She collected everything she could, every detail, every transaction, every line of text, so that when she faced Daniel, she would have more than just words, but undeniable evidence. She knew, once this truth was exposed, her family would never be the same again. On July 14, 2023, Elena Rodriguez's house was filled with a stifling atmosphere. Even though outside, the summer sun was still pouring down on the Texas streets. After days of gathering evidence, after sleepless nights filled with anger and pain, Elena knew she could not delay any longer. She was ready to face her husband. When Daniel entered the house, his expensive suit was still neatly on, his face showing no sign of anything unusual, as if it were just a normal work day. But this time, Elena was no longer the resigned wife who silently sat in front of him, phone in hand, messages still visible on the screen. No more beating around the bush. No more doubt. I know everything. The words rang out like a verdict, hitting Daniel straight in the face without giving him any way out. His face changed instantly. His complexion paled. His body stiffened for a few seconds before he tried to regain his composure. But Elena had known him too long to not notice the signs of panic. Daniel stuttered a few nonsensical words, trying to look surprised, but his eyes betrayed him. Elena didn't give him a chance to deny it. She threw the screenshots on the table. Each text message between him and her mother was like a sharp knife tearing apart the fake mask that Daniel had been trying to wear for so long. Each piece of evidence was a bullet shot straight into the pride of a man who had always been in control of everything. And when Daniel understood that there was no way to deny it, real fear appeared in his eyes. Daniel was not only afraid that his wife would find out, but he was afraid that this could completely destroy his life. The law career he had worked so hard to build would collapse if this affair were exposed. Such a scandal, to his own mother-in-law, would not only be a simple betrayal, but also a devastating blow to his reputation. Daniel knew that if Elena decided to bring this evidence to light, he would lose everything: his family, his job, the respect of society, and he might even face legal consequences. In an instant, Daniel's panic turned to fury. When cornered, a man like him could not accept defeat. Elena had expected her husband's reaction, but she had not expected that his anger would explode in such an uncontrollable way. The truth had been exposed. There was no way back. The sense of power, the control that he had always held in his hands, was now slipping away. Panic tightened around Daniel like an invisible rope, and in that moment, he could think of nothing but silencing Elena. There was no plan, no calculation, but violence often comes when an animal is cornered. In a split second, Daniel lunged. He didn't scream, he didn't make any threats. It was pure instinct. Strong hands tightened around Elena's neck. The victim struggled, clawed, tried to fight back, but her strength was no match for the man who was trying to kill her. Gasps and struggles echoed in the otherwise quiet house. Daniel's fingers tightened like steel pincers, his face flushed with tension and uncontrolled rage. Elena tried to open her mouth, tried to call for help, but all that came out were weak, broken moans. Her eyes widened in utter panic, then slowly filled with fear and despair. Then everything stopped. Elena's body lay motionless on the backyard floor, her eyes staring blankly up at the blue Texas summer sky. No more struggles, no more breathing, no more life. Daniel stood there, his hands still shaking, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized what had gone wrong. A moment of loss of control had sent him over the edge. He was no longer the successful husband, no longer the respected lawyer. Now he was just a murderer, but panic was short-lived. The survival instincts that had gotten him where he was today kicked in. Daniel quickly regained his composure. He had to fake the scene. He had to make it look like an accident. He bent down, examined Elena's body, smoothed away the signs of struggle on her shirt. He looked around the backyard, his mind racing. What the police had seen when they arrived had to be an accident. An accident. Daniel dragged Elena's body into a corner, adjusting her position to create the impression of a fall. He hastily wiped away fingerprints from her neck, trying to erase any trace that might betray his actions. On the morning of July 15, 2023, a call came in from the Texas Police Department's emergency line. Daniel Herrera's voice was shaky, but not too frantic. He said he had just found his wife lying motionless in the backyard, showing no signs of movement. When the police and paramedics arrived at the scene, they found Elena Rodriguez lying on the tile floor, her eyes wide open and lifeless, her body cold in the morning sun. There was no sign of a violent struggle, no blood or murder weapon, but what caught investigator Sandra Ken's attention from the start was Daniel's expression. He did not cry, nor did he appear desperate like a husband who had just lost his wife suddenly. Instead, he seemed calculating, careful in his responses. When asked about what happened, Daniel said he woke up as usual and found his wife dead when he went out into the backyard. He assumed that Elena might have fallen and died during the night. But Sandra Ken immediately noticed the contradictions in his story. If it was really an accident, why didn't Daniel find out that night? Why didn't he show any signs of panic when he called 911? Her instincts, as a seasoned investigator, told her that this was no ordinary accident. When the forensic police conducted a preliminary examination, a suspicious detail quickly emerged. There were no signs of trauma from a fall, but there were faint bruises on the victim's neck, a clear sign of strangulation. In addition, the scene was too clean, too perfect. There were no signs of a struggle, no signs that Elena had tried to call for help. That meant she had been deliberately murdered and the killer had deliberately covered up the traces. As the police focused on the crime scene, a key witness emerged, Elena's best friend Linda Martinez. Upon hearing about Elena's death, she immediately contacted the police, providing a testimony that would completely change the course of the investigation. Linda said that just a few days earlier, Elena had confided in her that she had discovered Daniel's affair with her mother, Natalia Gomez. She even said that she had gathered evidence and was planning to confront her husband. Linda's testimony transformed the case from a simple accident to a murder investigation with a clear motive. The police immediately seized the victim's phone, and it didn't take long to confirm Linda's information. Intimate text messages between Daniel and Natalia appeared clearly on the screen. A series of secret meetings, loving words, and secret plans were exchanged. More importantly, there was a text message from Elena to Linda herself 2 days before the murder, in which she claimed she had enough evidence to confront Daniel. But the most horrifying thing of all the text was the last text message Elena ever sent. Daniel Herrera was arrested on the afternoon of July 15, 2023, just hours after the police had gathered enough evidence to show that this was not an accident, but a premeditated murder. As the handcuffs tightened around his wrists, he tried to maintain his composure, but the confidence of a seasoned lawyer could not hide the confusion in his eyes. He knew that the game was up, but he still hoped that he could bend the law, that he could find some loophole to escape punishment. In the interrogation room, Daniel is confronted by Inspector Sandra Ken, who has been on the case from the beginning. He denies all charges, insisting that Elena's death was an unfortunate accident, that he had nothing to do with it. The lies are perfectly arranged, the arguments are made to protect himself. But Sandra Ken is not an investigator to be fooled. The bruises on the victim's neck, the inconsistencies in his testimony, the adulterous text messages discovered on his phone, and most importantly, the motive for the murder. He cannot argue as the pieces of the puzzle gradually fit together, painting a complete picture of the crime he committed. The interrogation lasted for hours. Daniel began to lose his composure. He repeatedly asked for a lawyer, but even his defense attorney knew that it was almost impossible to defend him. When the police presented forensic evidence confirming that Elena had been strangled to death, and that there were no signs of a fall, Daniel began to collapse. The psychological pressure was too great, and his denials became incoherent and contradictory. After hours of facing the undeniable truth, he put his head down on the table, covered his face with his hands, and finally confessed everything. He said that when Elena confronted him, the fear of losing everything made him lose control. He had no intention of killing his wife from the beginning, but when he realized that she had evidence that could ruin his reputation, his career, and his life, he did it. After the crime, he tried to fake the scene, hoping that the police would believe it was an accident. But even after confessing, he tried to justify it by saying that it was not a deliberate act, but just a moment of anger that lost control. Daniel Herrera's trial began on a cold November morning in 2023, drawing a great deal of public attention. In the crowded courtroom, all eyes were on the defendant, a man who had once been a respected lawyer, now a wife killer. His face was no longer confident, but tense and pale. He knew that what happened today would determine the rest of his life. The prosecutors stood before the jury, presenting a coherent and powerful account of what had happened. The evidence was solid and incontrovertible. Images of text messages on the victim's phone, witness testimony, bruises on Elena's neck, and marks on Daniel's clothes, all of it creating a clear chain of events. Daniel had killed Elena in a fit of panic when he learned she was about to expose his affair with his mother-in-law. The amorous text between Daniel and Natalia Gomez, along with Elena's final text to Linda Martinez, were fatal stabs at the defense's flimsy defense. Linda Martinez, the victim's close friend, was called to the witness stand. Her voice trembled as she recalled her final conversations with Elena, her fear, her pain when she discovered the truth. But before she could do anything, her husband killed her. Many in the courtroom bowed their heads, some silently wiping away tears as they listened to Elena's final words. No one could have imagined the betrayal and fear she endured before her last breath. The defense tried to mitigate the charges by arguing that Daniel had acted in a moment of rage without any premeditated intent to kill. They insisted that he had been pushed into a stressful situation, that he was not a cold-blooded killer but a man who had made a mistake. But these arguments were not enough to convince the jury. When the prosecutor countered, they pointed out that Daniel had tried to disguise the crime scene, cover up evidence, and create a false narrative of an accident, all of which demonstrated that he had the knowledge and will to conceal his crime. The jury deliberated for hours, but the verdict came as no surprise. When the judge returned and announced his verdict, the courtroom was deathly silent. Daniel Herrera was sentenced to 55 years without parole for first-degree murder. He sat motionless in his chair, his hands clenched, his eyes vacant, as if he had just lost everything. After the verdict, public opinion not only focused on Daniel Herrera, but also raised an important question. What role did Natalia Gomez play in this case? The sinister relationship between her and her son-in-law directly led to the tragedy. But was Natalia involved in the plan to kill Elena? The police opened a separate investigation into this woman, tracing her calls, text messages, and even her travel schedule in the days before the incident. They wanted to know if she knew about Daniel's intentions in advance, whether it was possible that this was a conspiracy between the two, or simply a murder in a panic. However, there was no evidence that Natalia was directly involved in the crime. Although text messages between her and Daniel showed that they had been in a relationship for months, there was no indication that she had instigated or planned Elena's murder. Natalia denied all charges, claiming that she had no knowledge of the murder until she was informed. Without strong enough evidence to convict her, the police were forced to close the investigation against Natalia, but that did not mean that she was innocent in the eyes of the public. Immediately after the truth was revealed, Natalia's life completely collapsed. Friends shunned her. Family turned their backs on her. Neighbors looked at her with contempt. She was not a murderer, but someone who betrayed her own daughter in the most cruel way. The media constantly exploited the scandal, turning Natalia into a scandalous figure, a mother who was considered inhuman. When she stepped out into the street, she faced whispers and contemptuous looks. No one cared whether she regretted it or not. Because in everyone's eyes, Natalia had long lost her qualifications as a mother. But if Natalia's reputation is ruined, the loss for Elena's two young children will be even more painful. They will lose their mother forever, and their father will spend the rest of his life behind bars. The children are too young to understand the tragedy, but one day they will have to face the truth that their father killed their mother. No one knows how they will grow up, when all that remains is the memory of a once happy family, but then destroyed by dark secrets. The house where Elena once lived is now a symbol of betrayal, of an irreversible tragedy. The walls that once echoed with the laughter of a happy family are now the dark shadow of an unforgivable crime. Neighbors no longer want to mention this place. Some even avoid passing by, as if afraid that the atmosphere of mourning still haunts. Justice has been served, but the pain remains forever indelible. The case is closed, but the public is still haunted by the question. If Elena had acted sooner, could she have been saved? If she had not confronted Daniel alone, would the outcome have been different? But some questions will never be answered. What remains is a woman who died unjustly, a killer locked in prison, and children who must grow up with a wound that will never heal. This tragedy is not just a story about a murder, but a haunting warning about betrayal, greed, and the price of hidden secrets. Story 2. One cold winter morning, in a small town in Montana, a 5-year-old boy named Ethan mysteriously disappeared while playing outside. This remote town, with a population of just over 1,500, is known for its peacefulness and community. The people live close together, sharing joys and sorrows, and always consider each other family. Children play freely in the streets, and the doors of their houses are never locked. However, all that changes one winter day, when Ethan, a child with bright red hair and a clear laugh, steps outside to enjoy the cold, snowy air. That morning, as the snowflakes fall to the ground, the boy asks his parents for permission to go out and play. Of course they agree, as they always do. Ethan promises to return in 20 minutes. But when his father, Thomas, steps outside to check, the boy is gone. No one has seen him, no trace, no call. A massive search was launched not only by the family but also by the community. Townspeople lined up in the snow, carefully turning over treetops, searching the nearby woods and frozen lakes. Time passed, but Ethan was nowhere to be found. The search dragged on for weeks, but to no avail. Police, rescue teams, and even volunteers from other areas joined in, but all efforts were in vain. Finally, when too much time had passed, the official search was called off. But for Thomas and his wife, Caroline, hope never died. Every day they searched for small clues, unexpected signs that might lead them to their son. The reports, the unanswered calls, all left only an indelible mark. The town returned to normal, but no one forgot the loss. The Coulter family lived in an emptiness. Their home would never be the same again. Caroline still does her chores, finding temporary peace in the simple tasks. But the emptiness still lingers in her heart every time she looks at Ethan's room, where the toys left over from his days there still lie in the corner. Everything feels still, as if time has stopped in that house. Time passes, but the pain of loss remains. 8 years later, Thomas and Caroline Coulter still live in hope, but also in the inevitable weariness and hurt. Although the community has returned to a normal rhythm, for the Coulter family the world still stopped on the day Ethan disappeared. The house still retains traces of the past, but everything feels cold and empty. Thomas still makes it a habit to check the monthly reports of the investigation, even though they never yield any new results. Still, it was the only way he could feel that his son was not completely gone from this world. Every morning, as the light of day began to filter through the windows, Thomas would flip through the documents, checking for seemingly small details that offered a glimmer of hope. Witness statements, information from other areas that the police had not checked thoroughly enough. All of this only made him more tired. Caroline often saw Thomas like this, sitting for hours at the dining table, his eyes distant, filled with worry and anxiety. She did not blame him, but silently shared her pain with her husband. Both of them carried a loneliness that no one could understand, especially when they faced the fear that they would never find their son. Over the years, their family had lost a close relationship with the people in the town. Although at first everyone tried to help, gradually the fruitless searches made everyone tired and give up. The meetings and inquiries became rare. Neither Caroline nor Thomas could face the eyes of the people around them who could not feel the pain they had to go through every day. One morning, when the snow began to fall heavily, Thomas received a call from the police, a notification he had been waiting for all these years. "We have a new lead," the police officer said over the phone, his voice both calm and full of promise. "We received a possible information from an old neighbor. They said there might be a new lead in his son's disappearance." Thomas felt his heart pounding, unable to believe his ears. At first he thought it was just another call, vague and uncertain. But this time a strange feeling spread through him. Thomas immediately went to the police office, where he was reunited with the old investigators who had worked on the case from the beginning. They handed him a thick file and informed him that there were some clues related to a neighbor, someone who lived near the Coulter house at the time of Ethan's disappearance. "We don't know for sure, but we need you to come check it out," the sheriff said. "We think there might be something we missed before." Thomas said nothing, just nodded and left the office with a strange feeling. It felt like a door had opened, a new, slim chance to find his son. He got back in his car and drove home with trembling hands. Caroline saw her husband's eyes as he entered the house. "Any news?" she asked, her voice hopeful but also worried. Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he just handed her the file, and Caroline opened it to read the information she had never known. They both knew that this might be their last chance. But they also knew that, no matter where the investigation led, they couldn't change the past. They could only move on, knowing that their son might be somewhere they had never thought of. The exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but they couldn't give up. Even if it was just a glimmer of hope, they had to keep looking. The next day, Thomas and Caroline decided to go together to the neighbor's house that the police had mentioned in the report. It was a small, old house not far from theirs, but a strange feeling filled them as they stood in front of the gate that had not been repaired for a long time. No one seemed to be inside. The windows were shuttered, the lights were off, and the house was silent in the midst of a blanket of snow. They stood silently in front of the house, not daring to speak, wondering if this was where they would find answers after 8 long years. Thomas felt his heart pounding. Despite the vague information the police had given him, he couldn't help but entertain the possibility, however small, that his son might be somewhere nearby, hidden in the arms of someone they hadn't thought of. Caroline stood beside him, shivering slightly from the cold, but she knew she couldn't let fear stop them from moving forward. "Let's go in," she whispered, prying Thomas from the car and pulling him closer to the house. As they climbed the steps, the front door opened and a man stepped out. He was unfamiliar looking, with white hair and wrinkled skin. His eyes were suspicious, but when he saw Thomas and Caroline, he didn't show anger, just quiet observation. "What do you need?" he asked, his voice low and unfamiliar. Thomas and Caroline looked at each other before Thomas spoke. "We are relatives of a child who disappeared 8 years ago. We were told that you might know something about the case," Thomas said, trying to keep his composure. The man frowned, then turned back into the house for a moment before turning back around with a surprised but not exactly frightened expression. "So you haven't given up yet, have you?" he asked, his voice soft but somehow meaningful. Thomas felt his anxiety growing. He took a step toward the man, trying to make sense of the situation. "We don't want to bother you, but if you know anything, we'd love to hear from you," Caroline added, her voice soft but hopeful. The man sighed, then turned back into the house. "Come in," he said. Thomas and Caroline entered, unaware that this was the turning point in their lives. The house was dark, with old pictures on the walls and a large wooden table in the middle of the room. The man invited them to sit down in the chairs opposite. "You must be wondering how I know about this," he began. "I was the last person to see the child. Ethan, was it? I remember very well. It was a winter morning when I was walking. I saw the boy playing in the yard, and then suddenly he was gone. He disappeared right before my eyes." The man paused, as if he were trying to recover some vague image from the past. "But you know what else?" Thomas asked, his voice doubtful and hopeful. The man shrugged. "I don't know much. But I found this," he said, pulling an old photograph from a drawer. It was a picture of Ethan, the boy Thomas and Caroline had remembered for the past 8 years. "I found it in an old plastic bag in my backyard. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back it seems relevant." "Can you tell us where that plastic bag is?" Caroline asked, her hands clasped together. The man stood up and walked to the back of the house. Thomas and Caroline followed him, their hearts racing. They walked through the icy backyard, where snow covered the ground. The man stopped in front of an empty lot, then pointed to a spot in the yard. "I found that bag here," he said. "And there's something else," he continued, bending down and picking something out of the snow. It was a piece of cloth, small enough to be recognizable as part of the jacket Ethan had been wearing when he disappeared. "I don't know how this got here, but I think you should check it out." Thomas and Caroline said nothing. They stood there, staring at the piece of cloth, hoping and fearing. Was this the first sign of truth, or just a strange coincidence? Regret. But one thing they knew for sure, they would not give up the search. The next day Thomas and Caroline could not stop thinking about what had happened the night before. They sat in the quiet kitchen, the dim light from the ceiling lamp shining on their warm cups of coffee, but neither of them felt warm. The piece of cloth they had found in the neighbor's yard was still fresh in their minds. It felt like some kind of answer was coming, but at the same time it was pushing them toward an inevitable confrontation with the truth. Caroline could not stop thinking about the photo of Ethan that the neighbor's man had given them. It was a photo she had never seen before, because it was a photo Ethan had taken during his summer vacation when he was 6 years old. It was a picture of a boy, innocent and smiling, wearing his favorite red jacket. Caroline remembered it well. The whole family had had a nice vacation in the northern mountains, but this photo appeared in a different context. "What do you think of that neighbor?" Caroline asked, her eyes still fixed on the window looking at his old house. Thomas did not answer immediately. A feeling of worry and doubt still lingered in his heart, even though this might be their only chance to find their son. "I don't know," Thomas replied after a moment of silence. Everything he said was very vague, and something was wrong. "But we have to continue. The photo, the piece of cloth, these details might be the clues we need." After thinking carefully, they decided to return to the neighbor's house, looking for more clues or undiscovered details. Snow fell gently outside the window, and they knew that time was running out. Although they were uncertain of what they would find, they could not give up. No matter how terrifying it was, they had to find their son. When they arrived at the neighbor's door, no one answered immediately this time. They knocked again, but this time there was no welcome like before. Thomas felt a strange feeling come over him, a feeling he could not explain. He turned to Caroline, his eyes filled with anxiety. "Should we go in?" Caroline asked, her voice filled with worry. Thomas did not answer right away. He just nodded and stepped onto the steps. They had no choice. If they did not continue, this opportunity would be lost, possibly forever. Thomas pressed the doorbell again, and this time after a while the door slowly opened. The man who appeared before them was the same one who had led them into the house last night. This time, however, there was something different in his eyes, as if he had been preparing for this meeting for a long time. "You guys are here again?" he asked, his voice tired, but not without concern. "We need to know more about what you found in your yard," Thomas replied, his voice calm but firm. "The photo, the cloth, do they have anything to do with Ethan?" The man glanced over his shoulder as if to check that no one was listening, then finally pulled them inside. "You're just in time," he said, "but I can only tell you what I know, and I can't guarantee that you'll like what happens next." He led them into a dimly lit room at the back of the house. In this room there was a large table covered with scraps of paper, photographs, and other objects. The man opened a drawer and took out an old notebook, the pages yellowed with age. "I wrote down everything I knew about Ethan," he said, opening the notebook and pointing to a line he'd written 8 years ago. "Since that day, I haven't been able to forget what happened. Ethan didn't just disappear. He was taken. Caroline looked at the notebook, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. What they were reading was not a normal story. These were fragmented memories, pieces of the past that might help them find the truth. But they did not know if this was the truth or just the imagination of a person who had lived in solitude for too long. "Do you know who kidnapped Ethan?" Thomas asked, his eyes sharper than ever. The man sighed, then said in a low voice, "I don't know, but I think I saw him." Thomas's eyes lit up when he heard the man say that. The answer, although vague, contained a glimmer of hope. Caroline could not hide her excitement. The weight seemed to have been pushed to a climax. "Who did you see?" Caroline asked, her voice trembling slightly, both fearful and expectant. The man did not answer immediately. He sat down on the old chair in the corner of the room, his eyes staring into space, as if trying to remember what had happened. Thomas and Caroline were silent, waiting for his words. The air in the room was heavier than ever. "My memories are not very clear," he began, his voice echoing in the silence. "But I remember a man. I can't forget his face. At the time I thought he was just a stranger, but now I know he had something to do with Ethan's disappearance." "Can you describe him?" Thomas asked, rushing. He tried to keep his composure, but the fear was growing by the minute. The man shook his head slightly, trying to remember. He had a long scar on his left cheek. It seemed very deep, as if a sharp knife had cut through it without mercy. He was tall, with dark, rough hair and a cold look, as if he had never cared about anything but his own ends. Thomas felt a shiver run down his spine. The description was like a familiar ghost, as if the name had been lingering in his mind for years. But Thomas couldn't remember who. "So how do you think he's connected to Ethan's disappearance?" Caroline asked, her eyes full of anticipation. "Well," the man said, standing up and walking to a small cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it, rummaged around for a moment, and pulled out an old plastic bag. Inside were a few objects, and he placed the bag carefully on the table. "I found these when I was cleaning around the house. I didn't think much of them, but looking at them again, I realized they might be related to Ethan." Thomas and Caroline both bent down to look at the contents of the bag. There were some old papers, a small baby hat, and a metal lighter. The lighter had a small symbol engraved on it, a flying feather. Caroline felt a strange feeling as she looked at the symbol. She had seen it somewhere before, but where? "Whose symbol is this?" Caroline asked, her voice strained. The man looked at it thoughtfully. "I don't know, but I've seen it before on a man who I think it was. I'm just not sure." The three of them were silent for a long moment. What they had just heard, what they had just seen, all of it was a puzzle full of mysteries. Thomas felt his head spinning. The lighter might be the key to Ethan's disappearance, but it only added to the uncertainty of what they were looking for. "Have you seen this man many times?" Thomas asked, his eyes filled with doubt. The man nodded. "More than once. He's been here in this area a few times. I didn't think anything of it at first, but after hearing about Ethan, I realized he might know something. But I can't prove it, because he always leaves before I can ask him more." Caroline felt a weight on her heart. "So what are we going to do? Can we find this man?" The man looked at her silently, then stood up and walked to the door. "You can try asking some people in the village, but I'm not sure they'll help. Everyone knows that strangers around here are usually up to no good. But don't believe everything I say. You have to find out for yourself." Thomas and Caroline looked at each other. There was no time to hesitate. They knew that things were becoming clearer than ever, but also more dangerous. The feeling that they were heading into an inevitable confrontation, where the truth might be too dark, overwhelmed them. "We can't give up," Thomas said, his voice firm. "If this will help us find Ethan, we have to do it." The next day, Thomas and Caroline decided not to hesitate any longer. They began going from house to house in the area, knocking on doors and asking neighbors about the scarred man and the feathered lighter. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the difference between the people who lived in the community and the strangers, but no one could help much. They only knew that the man had appeared a few times, but no one knew much about him. As the sun set, and the streets of the village became more deserted. Thomas and Caroline began to feel the weariness creeping in. However, they couldn't give up. They knew that finding out the truth about Ethan, about the man they were hunting, was the key to getting their son back. One afternoon, when they stopped at a small cafe to rest, Caroline suddenly realized something. She looked at a photo on the wall, a familiar scene in the village, where she and Thomas had passed by many times. Suddenly, she remembered that the photo wasn't an ordinary scene, but a scene they had seen in a photo of Ethan when he was young, while the photo that Ethan's grandmother had kept. "Thomas, look." Caroline pointed at the photo. "This scene, it's like the place we saw before. The scene that Ethan's grandmother took of him when he was young." Thomas looked in the direction Caroline was pointing. Then his eyes stopped, becoming attentive. He remembered that this photo actually had an uncanny resemblance to the place where they had found Ethan's photo. It was that photo, where Ethan was standing on the shore of a lake, near a small forest, as if something was waiting for him. But why was this photo in a cafe owned by someone they didn't know? "That's right," Thomas whispered, his eyes gradually sharpening. "Maybe we've missed something important. This cafe, maybe he's been here before." With that in mind, they decided to ask the owner about the photo and why it was there. They went to the owner, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an unusually calm demeanor. After introducing themselves and explaining what was going on, the owner frowned. "The owner of this cafe is from the north. He comes from another village quite far from here," the owner began. "He never talked much about his past, but I do know that he cared a lot about children, especially missing children. He mentioned a boy who went missing years ago, but only in passing." "The missing boy? Was it Ethan?" Caroline asked quickly, her hands clenching, her anxiety rising again. The innkeeper nodded. "Sure. He mentioned Ethan a few times. I just didn't understand what he said, but I remember him talking about finding him in a secret place in the woods and then he disappeared. He always talked about wanting to save children and that they had to be protected from evil." This information gave Thomas and Caroline pause. They didn't know whether to believe what the landlady had told them, but the name Ethan, the strange words about saving the children, all pointed to a secret place in the woods. But was this just a coincidence, or a sign from someone who knew more than they thought? Determined to find answers, they left the cafe and returned to the woods near their home. This time they decided not to miss a single detail. They searched everywhere, checking every corner of the woods. Faint signs of passage, broken branches, dry footprints left on the ground, all led them deeper into the woods. They walked on until the sun had set, and then, when they reached a clearing among the ancient trees, they discovered a small hole in the middle of the land. A feeling of unease rose in Caroline's heart. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Thomas stepped closer to the hole, then bent down to look. It wasn't just any hole. It had a metal lid like the lid of a bunker. "We're here," Thomas said, his voice low. "It could be down here." Caroline felt her heart pounding. They stood there, staring at the hole in front of them, worried and hopeful. Could this be where Ethan had been trapped all these years? Thomas and Caroline stood in silence before the hole, where the faint light of dusk couldn't quite make out what lay below. They could feel the heaviness of the air around them, as if the forest held some dark secret they hadn't yet discovered. They both felt uneasy, but they also knew they couldn't go back. They had come too far, and finally the answer was right in front of them. Thomas bent down, examining the metal lid. It didn't look like a normal pit. It looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. Dust covered the surface of the lid, and old paint had faded. But what worried Thomas more was the eerie silence of the area around it. The forest was silent, not a sound from any animals. "What should we do?" Caroline asked, her voice filled with concern. Thomas didn't answer right away. He ran his hand over the metal surface of the lid, then slowly lifted it. The strange sounds of metal rubbing against metal added to the tension. Finally, the lid swung open, revealing a narrow passageway leading underground. A cold wind blew up from the tunnel, making them shiver. "Be careful," Thomas said, his eyes filled with caution. "Who knows what might be down there?" Caroline looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "We've gone too far, Thomas. If we don't go down there, we'll never know the truth. And I can't live without knowing what happened to Ethan." Thomas nodded, gathering his courage to step into the hole. He took one step at a time, descending the old metal steps, each step cautious. Caroline followed, her hands gripping the edge of the hole, her heart pounding with anxiety. A little further down they found a larger space, like an underground room built with crude materials. The air in this underground room was cold and stifling. The two of them stepped in carefully, searching for traces, clues that could lead them to the truth about Ethan. In front was an old wooden table, beside it was a worn stool, and on the table were old notebooks, which looked like they hadn't been used for a long time. "What are these notebooks?" Caroline asked, her fingers gently touching the yellowed pages. Thomas picked one up and opened it. The hastily written notes, sometimes scribbled, sometimes neatly drawn, suggested that someone had taken down some important information about the missing children in the area. But what puzzled Thomas was the name he had just read on one of the pages, Ethan Coulter. "Whose notes are these?" Thomas asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. Caroline looked at him, her eyes shining. "Is it that man? The one with the scar?" Thomas nodded, his eyes landing on a line carved deep in the notebook. "Sure, these are notes about the children he kidnapped, and it looks like he kept them here underground." The words seemed to cut through any hope they had. They were closer than ever to the truth, but they were also faced with a terrible truth they had never imagined. They were not just dealing with a madman, but with a vault of memories buried in darkness. Caroline could not help but feel the fear in her heart. She walked over to a large wooden cabinet, opened it, and saw something strange. It was a small backpack, seemingly a child's. She pulled it out and unlocked it. Inside were faded photos, some of Ethan as a child, others of children she could not recognize. She shivered when she saw a photo of Ethan and another boy together, both standing near a large tree in the woods. The other boy's face had a very clear scar on his cheek. "This is him," Caroline said. Pointing at the photo, her voice choked. "He's the one we're looking for." Thomas stared at the photo, a sense of dread rising inside him. They knew so much, but the truth was as murky as the darkness around them. How could they bring Ethan back when everything was so carefully hidden? They had stepped too deeply into a web of secrets from which they could not escape. When Caroline picked up the backpack, something at the bottom of the bag startled her. A small diary wrapped in thick cloth. Caroline opened it, the words inside taking her breath away. They were closer than ever. "Thomas, I think I found it," Caroline whispered, her hands shaking as she turned the pages. Thomas and Caroline stood silently in the underground room, the words in the kidnapper's diary still haunting their minds. The thin pages revealed terrifying stories they had never thought possible. The children had been missing, deceived for so long, but now the light was finally glimmering in the darkness. After discovering the diary and important pieces of information, the two returned to the surface, prepared to face the next steps. There was no doubt that they had to meet Ethan. They had to find a way to free him and the other children from the man who had kidnapped them. And no matter how painful or difficult it was, they had to bring the truth to light. Caroline held Thomas's hand tightly, feeling the cold and anxiety overwhelm any remaining emotions. She looked at him, saying nothing, but her eyes were filled with determination. They had come too far, had found too much to stop. The two walked out of the forest, towards Harold's house, where they knew for sure that the price of the secrets would be great. When they arrived, Harold was no longer home. His house was empty, leaving only a feeling of emptiness that was terrifying. Neither of them needed to say anything more. They knew the answer was right in their hands. But what they didn't expect was that when they turned around, they noticed a faint finger standing in the distance, watching them intently. "Ethan," Caroline called softly, unable to keep the worry out of her voice. Ethan stood there, his eyes empty, devoid of any emotion. He was wearing an old jacket, his face haggard and covered in old wounds. He looked at them, then lowered his head, as if he didn't want to face the truth. Thomas and Caroline stepped closer, but not in a hurry. They knew that Ethan had been through too much pain and loss, that he needed time to come to terms with it all. Thomas walked over to him, gently placing his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Think you found us, Ethan," Thomas said, his voice warm but not lacking in seriousness. "We'll get through this together." Ethan didn't answer right away. He just stood there silently, his eyes filled with tears. But then, finally, a deep sigh escaped him. He looked into Thomas and Caroline's eyes, as if for the first time in years he could really see them. "Caroline, Thomas," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. I can't forgive myself. What I did, I let myself get caught up in Harold's lies. And I hurt all of you, but I can't change the past. I just hope you understand." Caroline stepped forward, placing her hand on his. "Ethan, you can't change the past, but we can change the future. We can start over." Ethan looked into her eyes, a glimmer of hope in them. But then he bowed his head, not wanting to face his past. Caroline pulled him back, keeping him looking at her. "Ethan, what happened is a lesson. And us, we are family. No matter what, family is always there." It felt like a layer of ice inside Ethan began to melt. He didn't know where to start, but a part of him began to believe that healing was possible. The pain in his heart slowly subsided, and in its place was a new understanding that healing would come when he allowed himself to accept the past, forgive himself, commit suicide, and dare to believe in the love and support of his family. Caroline and Thomas returned with him, taking him to a new place, where there was no fear or guilt about the past. They searched for ways to help him recover, not only physically but also mentally. Together they taught him how to deal with his wounds and how to heal not only himself but also those around him. Over the following weeks, Ethan slowly returned to the world he had been cut off from for so many years. Caroline, Thomas, and his old friends were there for him, helping him through the painful moments, slowly helping him find a sense of safety and peace. One day, while they were sitting around the dinner table, Ethan suddenly spoke up. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me, for giving me the chance to heal." Caroline smiled, touching his shoulder. "We've been through a lot, Ethan, but what matters is that we're still here, together. Healing isn't a destination, it's a journey." Thomas nodded, his eyes sad but also full of understanding. "We'll continue this journey together, Ethan. It's never too late." The three of them sat there, looking at each other in silence. Although the journey of healing was not easy, they knew that everything would be okay. In that moment, they understood that the strength of a family comes not from perfection but from the ability to love, forgive, and overcome any challenge together. Story 3. Willow Creek, Oregon, in 1995, is a small town nestled in the foothills of the Cascade Range, where rolling pine forests meet dusty red dirt roads. Willow Creek High School is the community's hub, where kids from scattered farms and neighborhoods gather every day. One fall afternoon, 6 girls, Lily Harper, Sarah Nguyen, Emma Walsh, Mia Rodriguez, Chloe Kim, and Ava Patel go on a school-sponsored field trip to an abandoned farm a few miles from town. It's an annual event where students explore nature and write reports for their biology class. No one expected the trip to turn tragic. Now the farm, once the property of the Grayson family before it was abandoned in the 1970s, is now nothing more than weedy fields and a dilapidated wooden house. The girls, all 16, laughed as they stepped off the school bus, carrying backpacks and disposable cameras. Lily Harper, with her blonde hair tied back and a silver bracelet given to her by her teacher, Emily Harper, led the group. She was the bubbly one, always making the group laugh. Sarah, more reserved, took careful notes about the plants. Emma, Mia, Chloe, and Ava each had their own personality, but they were as close as sisters, singing their favorite songs to the latest pop tunes on the radio. But as dusk fell, the bus returned to school without the 6 girls. The teacher in charge, Mrs. Clara Evans, panicked when she realized they were gone. A search was organized immediately. The police, locals, and volunteers searched nearby farms, woods, and trails. There were no traces, no backpacks, no cameras, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the 6 girls had vanished into thin air. Theories arose: a kidnapping, an accident in the woods, even that the girls had run away to find a new life. But there was no evidence, and as winter came, the search faltered. Willow Creek was consumed by grief, and the mystery of the 6 girls became a scar that would never heal. Emily Harper, the girls' math teacher and Lily's aunt, was consumed by grief. She had encouraged Lily to go on the trip, thinking it would be a fun day. Every night she sat in the living room, staring at the last photo of the 6 girls, taken by another student on the trip. They stood in a meadow, smiling, with the decaying log house and the green hills behind them. Emily clutched the same silver bracelet she had given Lily, as if it could draw her niece back. Time passed, and the mystery remained unanswered. Some whispered that the girls had fled the small town, seeking the city lights. Others believed they had encountered a wild animal in the Cascade Woods. But Emily didn't believe any of it. She knew Lily loved her family, loved Willow Creek, and would never leave without a word. The years turned into decades. Willow Creek changed the school, was renovated, and new shops opened, but the pain remained. Emily retired in 2015, moving to a small house on the outskirts of town, where she lived quietly, haunted by her memories. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, she held a vigil at the school, where the community gathered to light candles and pray. But by 2023, 28 years later, the attendance had dwindled to just a few aging faces and a few curious students. On the morning of the anniversary, Emily stood before the photo of the 6 girls in the school hall, now framed and set on a wooden pedestal. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating Lily's radiant face. Emily felt a strange urge, like an invisible whisper. She couldn't explain it, but her feet automatically moved to the car, carrying the photo and the silver bracelet. She drove to the farmland, now owned by Victor Crane, a wealthy but secretive real estate developer. The land was no longer deserted. A paved road led through an iron gate, with a no trespassing sign hanging overhead. In the distance, a stone and wood mansion stood, surrounded by carefully tended gardens. Emily parked the car on the side of the road, stepped out, and looked through the gate. The old cabin was gone, replaced by ornamental shrubbery and a small pond. She compared the view to the photograph in her hand. The hills in the distance were still there, but the land had changed completely. She called Tom Bradley, an old farmer who had worked at Grayson Farm. His voice was hoarse with age. That land. Crane bought it in 1997 and tore it all down. This is land now with a huge mansion there. No one's allowed in. He doesn't like visitors. Emily felt disappointed, but a strange feeling still drove her. She walked along the fence, looking for traces of the past. Then suddenly, she tripped over a root and fell forward. When she stood up, she noticed that a section of the fence had come loose, creating a small gap. Her heart pounded. She knew she shouldn't, but she slipped through the gap, stepping into the forbidden land. Inside Victor Crane's estate, the air was strangely quiet. Neatly trimmed bushes led to what had once been a wild meadow. Emily walked softly, leaving no trace. She tried to remember the image in the photograph: 6 girls standing near a large oak tree, now gone. Only the old pines at the edge of the forest remained, like silent sentinels. She stopped at the area where she guessed the photograph had been taken. Everything had changed, but something about it made her shiver. She knelt down, touching the ground, as if it could tell the story of 28 years ago. Then, a faint sound rang out, as faint as the wind. Emily held her breath, listening. The sound came back, clearer, a faint melody, like the song Lily and her friends had loved, Wonderwall. But the voice was weak and shaky, as if coming from far away. She looked around, her heart pounding. The sound seemed to come from a nearby weed patch. She pushed back the grass, revealing an old well covered by a rusty iron grate. She bent down and pressed her ear to the grate. The singing started again, followed by a dry, hacking cough. It was a human voice, a living one. Emily felt her blood run cold. She called softly through the grate, "Is anyone there?" But there was no answer. The singing continued, broken, as if the singer didn't know anyone was listening. She picked up the phone, her hands shaking, and dialed 911. "This is Emily Harper," she whispered. "I'm on Victor Crane's property, near the Cascades. I heard voices coming from an old well. Someone might be trapped down there." The operator looked skeptical. "You're on private property. Do you have permission to go in there?" Emily took a deep breath, admitted that she had accidentally damaged the fence, and stepped in. "I know I was wrong, but this is an emergency. I heard coughing and singing. Someone needs help." After a few tense minutes, the operator agreed to send the police. "Wait outside the property, near your car," the operator instructed. Emily turned back through the gap in the fence and stood beside the car, her eyes fixed on the iron gate. She clutched the photograph, praying that she wasn't imagining things. As she waited, she called Tom Bradley back. "Tom, is there a well or a cellar underground on the Grayson farm?" she asked, her voice urgent. Tom thought for a moment. "No, Emily. It's just dirt and a few ponds. No cellars or anything. Why do you ask?" She told him what she'd heard. Tom's voice grew serious. "That's impossible. I've worked there for a decade, and there's nothing underground. If there is anything, it couldn't have been built until after Crane bought the property." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "I've called the police. They're on their way. Can you come over? You know this property better than anyone." Tom agreed immediately. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." Emily stood by the road, the wind tousling her hair. She looked at the photo, Lily's face calling to her. A strange, almost supernatural feeling made her believe she had been brought here for a reason. Soon Tom's old truck appeared. He got out, his lined face alight with concern. "Are you sure, Emily?" Voices from the well. She nodded, pointing toward the lot. "I heard it. A song and a cough. Someone's down there, Tom." Before they could say more, police lights flashed in the distance. A patrol car pulled up, and 2 officers got out: Detective Laura Mitchell, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, and Detective Ryan Cole, younger, with a brisk appearance. "Mrs. Harper?" Laura asked, her voice calm but serious. Emily nodded, introducing Tom as someone who had worked at the lot. She told them everything: the picture, the urge, the singing from the well. Laura took careful notes while Ryan watched the iron gate. "This is Victor Crane's land," Laura said. "He's a powerful man here. What you're saying is serious. Are you sure about what you heard?" Emily nodded, her voice firm. "I'm not imagining things. There are people down there, and they could be in danger." Laura exchanged a quick word with Ryan, then turned back. "Okay, take us to that well. Mr. Bradley, will you come with us?" Tom agreed, and the 4 of them stepped through the gap in the fence, back into the restricted area. Emily led them to the weeds, pointing to the grating. Laura knelt down, examining it closely. "It's old, probably from the Grayson farm," she said. Ryan shone his flashlight through the grating, but the light only revealed a deep, dark tunnel. "Nothing clear," he said, "but this is a strange tunnel." Emily motioned for everyone to be quiet. "Maya sling zeal." They listened, and after a few seconds the singing started again. Faint, broken, but definitely female. A dry cough followed, and Laura and Ryan exchanged a serious look. "There's definitely someone down there," Ryan said, "and from the sound of the cough they're probably in a bad way." Laura stood up, her voice firm. "We need to talk to Crane. This is a safety issue, and we need to get on official property." They turned back onto the road, got into the car, and drove to Victor Crane's mansion, not far away. Emily sat next to Tom, her heart pounding. She didn't know what to expect, but she felt like she was getting closer to the truth. Victor Crane's mansion stood like a fortress in the middle of the Cascades. Its gray stone walls were strung with polished oak, and its large windows reflected the sunset. Emily felt a chill as the police car pulled up in front of the main gate. Laura and Ryan gestured for her and Tom to wait outside, near the car, while they approached the front door. From her vantage point, Emily watched as the 2 detectives knocked. A moment later the door opened, but it wasn't Crane. Instead, he emerged from behind the house, wearing an expensive tracksuit, a large German shepherd in tow, but his face, though in his 60s, was still sharp. but his eyes cooled as soon as he saw Emily and Tom. Laura introduced herself and Ryan, explaining that they'd received a report of noises coming from a well on his property. Crane frowned, his voice harsh. "This is private property. He pointed at Emily, was trespassing. Now you've got the police to bother me with your nonsense?" Laura kept her cool, explaining that they were just making sure no one was in danger. "We heard singing and coughing coming from an old well. Someone could be stuck or worse." Crane sneered, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, this strange? Maybe the singing. I know everything about this property. There's no one down there. Just an old sewer, that's for sure." Ryan intervened, his voice mild. "Sir, if someone was in trouble, even if it was a trespasser, wouldn't you want to know? Could be a homeless person or someone who found an old cellar." Crane crossed his arms, his eyes searching. "I've owned this property for 25 years. I know every inch of it. There's no cellar or people down there." But when Laura mentioned the grating and the singing, a moment of hesitation crossed his face. So quick Emily almost missed it. Laura insisted, "We want to check the property and the house, including the cellar. This is a safety check, not a search for criminals." Crane tightened his grip on the dog's leash, and the animal growled softly. "You're not coming in here without a warrant. This is private property." Ryan nodded. "We understand, sir. But if you don't cooperate, we'll get a warrant. It'll take time, but we'll be back." Crane looked at them, then at Emily, his eyes burning. Finally, he turned and slammed the door. Laura and Ryan got back into the car, motioning for Emily and Tom to return to theirs. "We'll get a warrant," Laura told Emily. "I'll check the property records and Crane's history. Something's wrong and I'll find out." Emily nodded, feeling both hopeful and scared. They were quiet on the way to Tom's house, a small cabin in the pines. Tom's house was simple, with an old armchair and a few family photos on the walls. He made tea and brought out 2 steaming cups. "Why didn't the diocese tell you about the sale?" Tom asked, sitting across from Emily. She shrugged, sipping her tea. "I'm just a teacher. They probably didn't think it was necessary. But Lily is my niece. They should say something." Tom nodded, his eyes distant. After the disappearance, the school was in trouble. The parents withdrew their children. The reputation was bad. Crane bought the land through a company and paid a high price. No one asked much. Emily frowned. What did Crane do right after he bought the land? Tom pondered. Destroyed the wooden house immediately. A team came and cleaned it up in a few days. Some people objected and wanted to keep it because of the history, but he had money and connections. After that, he did gardening and built a villa. But he didn't build anything in the photo studio. She felt a shiver go down her spine. Did anyone see him digging anything strange? Like building a tunnel? Tom shook his head but then stopped. In 1998, someone said they heard machinery at night. There was a slight tremor, but the police said it was a small earthquake. Now that I think about it, it's really strange. Emily clutched her teacup, her mind racing. If Crane had built a secret bunker, he would have hidden it well. But why? And who was in the well? She didn't dare think further, but her heart told her the answer might involve Lily. Emily's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Laura. "We have an order," she said, her voice firm. "The judge approved it based on safety concerns. We're heading back to the Crane property. You and Mr. Bradley stay put, safety first." Emily passed the message to Tom, and he insisted on following, even from a distance. "If we find anything, I want to know," he said. After a moment, Laura agreed but asked them to stay in the car, away from the scene. Emily and Tom followed the police car, stopping near the gate of the Crane estate. From the car, they saw several police cars gathered, along with an ambulance and a special investigation vehicle. Emily felt her heart sink as she thought about why the ambulance was there. Laura approached, handing Emily the phone. "This is a live feed from my camera. You can watch, but absolutely do not come near." Emily nodded, her eyes glued to the screen. Laura's camera feed showed the officers approaching the mansion. Crane opened the door, his face red with anger. He yelled, threatening legal action, but Laura calmly handed over a search warrant. Crane was placed under surveillance in the living room while the officers searched the house. After nearly an hour, Laura announced over the camera, "The main house and basement are clear. We'll check the forest path and outbuildings now." Crane, still under surveillance, said there was a small shed on the road that connected the villa to the well. The officers, with Crane, entered the woods. The camera showed a narrow path lined with tall pine trees. After a few minutes, they came to a wooden shed, larger than Emily had expected, with a metal roof and faded walls. Inside were gardening tools, lawn mowers, and a musty smell. Crane muttered that it was just a storage shed, that they were wasting their time. The officers searched carefully, moving crates and wooden shelves. Then, a noise, an officer dropped a wrench and the wooden floorboards sounded hollow. Laura knelt down and tapped. "This is different," she said, shining a flashlight. "This wood is newer than the others." Over Crane's protests, the officers removed the wood, revealing a stone staircase leading down into the darkness. Laura turned back to Crane. "Explain, Mr. Crane." He was silent, his face pale, his confidence gone. Laura ordered a few officers to stay with Crane while she and Ryan prepared to go down the stairs. The camera switched to a tactical flashlight. The stairs were narrow, carved into the stone, the worn edges showing years of use. At the bottom was a heavy wooden door, locked with an old iron lock. Laura asked for the key, but Crane denied knowing. An officer found an iron key in a nearby alcove and Laura opened the door, the lock clicking. Inside was a man-made tunnel, about 6 feet high and 3 feet wide, with earth and stone walls reinforced with wooden beams. "Recently built," Laura remarked, "but deliberately made to look old." They moved on, the tunnel curving gently. Emily realized it led to the well. After a few minutes, the tunnel opened into a small room. The light illuminated a thin mattress, a bucket, and a wooden table with some dried food. Then, from the darkness, a faint voice called out, "Help anyone?" Laura turned the light toward the voice. An elderly woman, thin, lay on the mattress, her gray hair cut short, her hand clutching a silver bracelet. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken but alert. "I'm Lily Harper," she whispered, her voice strained. Emily, in the car, burst into tears. "Lily, my granddaughter." She took Tom's hand, tears streaming down her face. The screen showed a room covered in carvings on the walls, hearts, girls' names, and the words were still here. On the table was a burned-out candle and a hand-drawn picture, faded like the old photo. Laura approached, her voice gentle. "Miss Harper, we're the police, we're gonna get you out." She radioed, ordering the paramedics and investigators to come down. Lily pointed to a dark corner. "Sarah, Emma, Mia, they're gone." The camera panned to a corner where 3 mattresses covered with old blankets had been found. The authorities had determined that the occupants had been long dead. Emily covered her face, grief mixed with wonder. Lily was alive, but the price of her survival was too great. She wanted to run, but Tom held her back. "Let them do their work," he said. "You'll see her soon." At the Crane estate, the police worked feverishly. Paramedics emerged from the shed, carrying a stretcher. Lily, so weak she was almost invisible under the blankets, was wheeled out. As the stretcher passed Emily, her eyes searched for her. Despite the harshness of time, Emily recognized her niece in those eyes that had been bright at 16, now filled with a lifetime of pain. Lily's lips moved, wordlessly, but Emily read, "I always knew." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I never stopped looking for you." The paramedics loaded Lily into the ambulance, sirens blaring as it sped toward the hospital. Soon, investigators were carrying the bags of remains. Sarah, Emma, and Mia. Emily guessed. She closed her eyes, praying for them to rest in peace. In the middle of the line, she saw Victor Crane being led away, handcuffed. There was no longer any arrogance in him, only defeat. As he passed, he looked at Emily, his eyes full of resentment. She wiped her tears, stood up, and said nothing. The truth had won. Emily and Tom followed the ambulance to Willow Creek Hospital. In the emergency room, the staff stopped them. A nurse, her voice soft, explained, "Miss Harper is very weak. She is severely malnourished and vitamin deficient, and has many old wounds that have not healed. We need time. Emily nodded, though her heart was burning. She is my niece. I have been looking for her for 28 years. The nurse softened. I understand. She is asking about you. When you are stable, you will see her. Emily and Tom sat in silence in the waiting room. Tom spoke. It is amazing. After all these years. Emily nodded, her voice choking. But the price is too high. She thought of Sarah, Emma, Mia, even Chloe and Ava, the girls who had not returned. Emily's phone rang again. It was Laura. We searched the Crane house more thoroughly. We found a hard drive. It has data from 1995, detailing the kidnapping. Emily took a deep breath, preparing herself. Laura continued. Crane hated school. He was bullied and expelled. He targeted girls for revenge and picked on them because they were popular and happy. Emily felt more sad than angry. How did he do it without anyone knowing? Laura sighed. He planned it. He followed the girls for months. On field trips, he pretended to be a delivery man, bringing them sedative drinks. When they were drugged, he restrained each one, took them through a secret passage in the cabin, and wiped them clean. Emily shuddered, imagining Lily and her friend's horror. What about Chloe and Ava? She asked, her voice shaking. Laura hesitated. The data shows they survived for a few years but died in the early 2000s, probably of illness. We're verifying the remains, Laura added. Crane built the tunnel soon after he bought the land. Records confirm that the noise in 1998 was due to the tunneling. He bribed several local officials to turn a blind eye. Emily shook her head, shocked by the scale of the crime. The doctor came in, interrupting. Mrs. Harper? I'm Dr. Patel. Your granddaughter is stable but very weak. After all these years underground, her immune system is almost gone. She needs time to recover. Emily nodded. Can I see her now? The doctor nodded. Yes, but you'll have to wear protective gear to avoid infection. Emily complied, donning a mask, gloves, and gown. She walked into the ICU, where Lily lay amid the tangle of IVs and machines. She was small and fragile, but her eyes were bright. You, Lily whispered, her voice weak. Emily took her granddaughter's hand through the gloves, tears falling. Lily, it's me. I'm sorry it took so long. Lily shook her head slightly. It's okay you came. I knew you would. She smiled, her lips chapped. School, is it okay? Emily laughed through her tears, still holding on. You'll see. Lily nodded, tightening her grip on the silver bracelet. I never left it. It reminds me of you. The nurse signaled the end of the hour. Emily stood, promising. I'll be here, Lily. I'm not going anywhere. She left the room, filled with emotions, joy at finding Lily, grief for those who didn't come back, and peace at knowing the truth was out. Willow Creek would heal, and Emily would be with Lily, every step of the way, back to the light. Story 4. On the eve of the Lunar New Year, in 2006, Yi Hongkue, the police chief of Yuzhong District in Chongqing, received an urgent phone call. The caller demanded his presence at the Great World nightclub within 10 minutes. Arriving just a few minutes late, Chief Yi was humiliated, forced to toast every person in the room, from the young women to the underworld kingpin presiding over the scene. The proud chief, overwhelmed by shame and indignation, broke down in tears on the spot. Who could reduce a decorated officer of the People's Police to such a state of submission and disgrace? The answer was Wen Chong, the former director of the Chongqing Justice Bureau and deputy director of the city's Public Security Bureau. What might seem like a scene ripped from a gangster film was, in fact, a stark reality within the very ranks of law enforcement. It laid bare the chilling extent to which organized crime had infiltrated the fog-shrouded city of Chongqing. Wen Chong once held unrivaled power in Chongqing. His name evoked images of cash stashed in fish ponds, affairs with glamorous actresses, and corruption on an unimaginable scale. Standing at 5 feet 5 inches, with a stocky build, square face, and glasses, the diminutive official was rarely seen without his signature Louis Vuitton belt. That belt, often unbuckled in the presence of famous starlets, became synonymous with Wen Chang's scandalous romantic exploits. After his arrest, it became fodder for tabloid headlines and entertainment media. Upon his capture, Wen Chang confessed to his illicit relationships with numerous actresses. At the height of his power, whenever a starlet performed in Chongqing, Wen Chang ensured they spent the night with him. If a celebrity resisted, he would pay exorbitant sums to obtain their private information, using it as leverage to coerce their compliance. Rumors swirled online that Wen Chang once competed with Shangqi's wealthiest tycoon, Li Jiahui, for a single night with South Korean actress Kim Hye-on. In 2005, Kim starred in the film Myth, which premiered in China. The film's producers brought her to Chongqing for a promotional event, drawing a crowd of influential figures. Li Jiahui, the Shangqi magnate, offered $80,000 to dine with Kim. As her manager negotiated with Li's secretary, a gang of men in black stormed the backstage area, smashing equipment and shouting aggressively, "Boss Wen Chang of Chongqing has his eyes on her. Back off." In the end, Wen Chang allegedly paid $200,000 to secure a night with Kim Hye-on. The truth behind this story, and its aftermath, remains known only to those involved. If the Kim Hye-on tale seems shrouded in speculation, another rumor about Wen Chang's affair with actress Ying Tao is far more detailed. It was said that Wen Chang kept Ying Tao as a mistress under a formal contract. When the rumor broke, Ying Tao's pristine image as a rising star crumbled overnight, plunging her acting career into a devastating crisis. Beyond his exploits with celebrities, Wen Chang also coerced Qin Guangming, a female police officer, into remaining unmarried for a decade. Chan, the former head of the Economic Crimes Unit of Chongqing's Public Security Bureau, hailed from a police family in Sichuan. With 28 years of service and 3 distinguished commendations, she had personally arrested over 7,000 criminals, mostly involved in drug trafficking and addiction, earning her the title heroine against narcotics. Her illustrious career should have been a beacon of pride, but her association with Wen Chang destroyed it. After his arrest, Chan was investigated, admitted to an affair with him, and was forced into early retirement, stripped of all her titles. Wen Chang's depravity extended even further. He dispatched his henchmen to local schools to scout for beautiful young women. At least 4 schoolgirls fell victim to his predation, while still students. How could Wen Chang wield such unchecked power with such brazen impunity be? Wen Chang's early years were marked by hard work and ambition. Yet, unable to resist the allure of wealth and power, he veered onto a perilous path, an invisible track that led him hurtling toward ruin. Born in 1955 in Zhengjia Town, Ba County, Chongqing, Wen came from humble beginnings. His parents worked at a local general store, raising 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls. As the second son, he earned the he was too short to enlist in the military. To ease his family's burden, he joined a youth volunteer program in the countryside. It was there that he began dating Zhu Xiaoya. Determined to rise above his circumstances, Wen Chang studied diligently, driven by a desire to secure a better life for his family. In 1977, he gained admission to the Sichuan Provincial Police Academy. After graduating, he was assigned to a police station in his hometown, launching his law enforcement career. Soon after, he and Zhu Xiaoya married. Financial constraints meant they skipped a wedding ceremony, and a year later, they welcomed their son, Wen Jiahao. Wen Chang approached his work with meticulous care, unflinching resolve, and a willingness to risk his life to solve cases. His dedication earned him rapid promotions, and colleagues harbored no envy, recognizing the sacrifices behind his success. In 1983, during a nationwide crackdown on crime, Wen Chang emerged as a key figure in Ba County's Public Security Bureau. His outstanding performance caught the eye of Zhang Wenbin, the county's party secretary, who praised his exceptional ability and bold work ethic. From that moment, Wen Chang's path to power seemed boundless. In 1985, at just under 30 years old, Wen Chang was appointed deputy secretary of the Bai County Party Committee, achieving a meteoric rise through 3 major promotions in record time. Despite his elevated status, he remained fiercely dedicated. During a small-scale coal mine collapse, Wen personally descended into the shaft to lead the rescue efforts, an act that stunned city leaders and deeply moved the local community. In 1988, a Southwest Airlines plane crashed in by county. Debris, luggage, and victims were scattered across hillsides and rice paddies. Upon receiving the report, Wen Chong led a police team to the scene, wading through freezing floodwaters to assist in the grueling rescue operation. By 1992, at age 37, Wen Chong was named Deputy Director of the Chongqing Public Security Bureau, overseeing criminal investigations. His transition from rural by county to the bustling metropolis of Chongqing marked a significant leap, yet he retained the cautious, humble demeanor of his countryside roots. According to Chongqing media reports, Wen spearheaded the resolution of numerous high-profile cases, earning repeated commendations from the Ministry of Public Security. When Chongqing became a centrally administered municipality in 1997, Wen Chong rose to a senior management role within the city's government. A major criminal case in 2000 would propel him to the pinnacle of his career, cementing his status as a legend. In 1991, a ruthless armed criminal syndicate led by the notorious Zhang Jun emerged in China. For nearly a decade, Zhang's gang roamed the country, committing brazen robberies and leaving a trail of bloodshed. Initially targeting small shops, they consistently evaded capture. By 1995, Zhang Jun escalated to robbing jewelry stores, shooting anyone who dared resist without hesitation. In 2000, the gang ambushed an armored cash transport in Changde, Hunan, unleashing a hail of gunfire that killed 7 people and injured 5 in a horrific massacre. After months of surveillance and exhaustive investigations, the police finally caught a break. Zhang Jun was heading to Chongqing to meet his mistress. The Chongqing police mobilized, with Wen Chong taking personal command of the operation. On the night of September 19, 2000, Zhang Jun slipped into a dimly lit alley to rendezvous with his lover. After a brief exchange, he grabbed a travel bag and prepared to flee. Suddenly, elite police forces swooped in, pinning him to the ground. When Chong charged forward, pressing his boot onto Zhang Jun's face, and called his superiors, "Zhang Jun is down. He's under my foot." Over the years, Zhang Jun's gang, comprising 50 members, had murdered 28 people and injured dozens across Hubei, Hunan, and Chongqing, committing heinous crimes that terrorized the region. The capture of Zhang Jun sent shockwaves through southwest China, elevating Wen Chong to near mythic status. Before the Zhang Jun case in August 2000, another rising star in Chinese law enforcement, Wang Lijun, was making waves. 8 years later, Wang would be transferred to Chongqing, setting the stage for a dramatic showdown with Wen Chong. At the time, however, Wen Chong was basking in the glory of his triumph, oblivious to the storm looming on the horizon. It's said that as Zhang Jun was apprehended, he spat a curse at Wen Chong. "One day you'll end up like me. You won't resist the temptation. You'll walk this path too." At the time, Wen Chong likely dismissed the words as the desperate rant of a defeated criminal, even joking about them publicly. Yet no one could have foreseen how prophetic they would prove. A decade later, Wen Chong would find himself ensnared by the law, facing a fate eerily similar to that of the very criminal he had brought to justice. Chongqing could well be China's most notorious gangster city. The underworld forces in Chongqing grew increasingly powerful, with rival factions clashing and overlapping in a chaotic web of crime. This escalation demanded a corresponding strengthening of police authority to maintain social order. At the heart of this power stood one man, Wen Chong, the official directly responsible for overseeing security and public order. As the saying went, if you lived in Chongqing and didn't know Wen Chong, you hadn't yet earned a place in the city's true criminal elite. Power, status, fame, and wealth. Wen Chong held them all in the palm of his hand. From 1992, when he became deputy director of the Chongqing Public Security Bureau, Wen Chong ascended to the zenith of his career, unknowingly setting the stage for his eventual downfall. His role in investigating cases required frequent interactions with underworld figures, and over time, these relationships grew uncomfortably close. In Chongqing, Wen Chong dominated major cases, particularly those of high significance. According to reports, at a birthday celebration for the daughter of notorious crime lord Wang Bing, when Chang made a bold appearance, flanked by a few police officers serving as his personal guard, a spectacle that turned heads among locals. Wang Bing's operations centered on running underground casinos and loan sharking, earning him a reputation as Chongqing's top illegal gambling kingpin. In December 1996, Wang Bing and another crime lord, Wang Wunan, sparked a dramatic shootout in an alley straight out of a gangster film. Yet, when the dust settled, the Chongqing police swiftly arrested the involved criminals, except for Wang Bing, who emerged unscathed thanks to Wen Chang's behind-the-scenes maneuvering. In the latter half of 1999, another major underworld figure, Wang Yunan, opened an illegal casino and recruited Li Hong, the head of a police unit, to provide protection. In 2000, during a police raid on the casino, a staff member shot and killed an officer on the spot. Li Hong, tasked by superiors with investigating the case, destroyed records and fabricated evidence to evade accountability. Li Hong, it turned out, had been groomed and promoted by Wen Chang himself. A prosecutor from the Chongqing People's Procuratorate later remarked that the city's underworld was effectively trained and shielded by its own police force. This wasn't unique to Chongqing. In 2000, nationwide crime rates surged by 63% compared to 1999, prompting the central government to launch the first national crime crackdown campaign in 2001. During this operation, Wang Bing was designated a Class A fugitive. When questioned about his ties to Wang Bing, Wen Chang claimed the crime lord was merely a special asset cultivated to aid police investigations. Meanwhile, Wang Bing fled with his family to the United States, only to be extradited back to China in 2018. Wen Chang protected many loyal henchmen, but one of them landed in serious trouble. Zai Kaiping, Chongqing's infamous female crime boss. Zai, who was Wen Chang's sister-in-law, partnered with others to run casinos, illegally amassing vast sums of money. In November 2005, Zai was arrested. Fearing the case would implicate him, Wen Chang enlisted subordinates to pull strings with the deputy director of investigations to smooth things over. In the end, Zai Kaiping was detained for just 5 months. As time passed, Wen Chang sank deeper into a life of debauchery, lavish parties, heavy drinking, beautiful women, and high-stakes gambling, with bets reaching tens of thousands of dollars per game. Under his leadership of the Public Security Bureau, Chongqing's crime landscape grew increasingly chaotic. Gangs operated with brazen impunity, as if the city were their playground. In return, these criminal organizations showered police officials with cash and women. In June 2008, Wang Lijun arrived in Chongqing from Liaoning province. Assuming the role of deputy director of the Public Security Bureau, in July 2008, Wen Chang was appointed director of the Chongqing Justice Bureau. These two anti-corruption crusaders stepped into their new roles, setting the stage for a dramatic clash. Upon arriving, Wang Lijun launched an aggressive anti-corruption campaign, cracking 32,771 criminal cases and arresting 9,512 suspects. The operation was so expansive that Chongqing's detention centers were perpetually overcrowded. Wen Chang, by contrast, grew conspicuously silent, rarely appearing in the media. Rumors of his ties to criminal syndicates began to spread, with whispers that his arrest was imminent. On August 7, 2009, while attending a conference in Beijing, Wen Chang was summoned back to Chongqing for questioning. Some say Wang Lijun personally led a police team to the airport, escorting Wen Chang from the plane to the station. On September 26, Wen Chang was formally arrested. Investigators searched his luxurious villa in Chongqing's Nanyan district, uncovering a trove of opulent treasures, crystal chandeliers worth tens of thousands of dollars, a nationally protected second-grade carved stone Buddha head, and an array of extravagant artifacts. The police could only shake their heads, stunned by the sheer extravagance. On February 2, 2010, the Chongqing High People's Court opened a public trial for Wen Chang's involvement in organized crime. The once legendary police hero faced charges of bribery, protecting and abetting criminal syndicates, possessing vast unexplained wealth, and rape. Prosecutors presented a ledger detailing an expenditure of 120,000 Chinese yuan, approximately 16,000 US dollars, labeled as payment for prostitution services. When Chong vehemently disputed this, insisting the sum was compensation for accidentally groping a female student while drunk, an explanation he deemed more reasonable than the investigators' claims. When Chong's wife, initially tight-lipped, erupted in fury upon learning of his numerous affairs, cursing him as a beast. In her anger, she led investigators to their villa, where they excavated a rooftop fish pond and uncovered 20 million Chinese yuan, approximately 2.8 million US dollars. On April 14, 2010, when Chong was sentenced to death on multiple charges, he appealed, but the Chongqing High People's Court upheld the original verdict. On the morning of July 7, 2010, when Chong was executed by lethal injection, ending his sordid saga, that afternoon his son collected his remains. Before his death, when Chong met with his sister and son one final time, he lamented that his demanding career had left him little time to spend with his son, whose academic performance suffered as a result. After high school, when Chong and Zhu Xiaoya sent their son to study in Canada, but he returned after just 8 months, unable to adapt. The last gift when Chong and Zhu Xiaoya gave their son was an internet cafe funded with 250,000 Chinese yuan, approximately 35,000 US dollars, in 2008. After his father's downfall, the business collapsed. Wang Lijun, meanwhile, flexed his authority, unleashing a seismic anti-corruption storm that rocked Chongqing. The city's government underwent a sweeping overhaul. During his tenure, Wang Lijun disciplined over 5,600 police officers. Some were fired, others sentenced to labor, and many faced criminal charges. Nearly every rank of Chongqing's police force, from top to bottom, was purged, with 3,528 new appointments filling the void in a historic restructuring. Over 900 officers had their reputations, salaries, and benefits restored. Yet, many cases remained unresolved. Over time, the scandals of the fog-shrouded city faded, swept away by the currents of the Yangtze River. Only those who suffered injustice carried the pain for a lifetime. Story 5. Located about 150 kilometers from the vibrant capital of Bangkok, a roughly 2-hour drive, Pattaya's name in Thai evokes a poetic image, the monsoon wind blowing from the southwest. Few know that, in its origins, Pattaya was merely a quiet, unassuming fishing village. Its transformation began during the Vietnam War, when it became a favored rest and recuperation hub for American officers. Recognizing its tourism potential, the Thai government invested heavily, turning this humble village into an international resort destination. Pattaya quickly gained fame for its stunning beaches, affordable fresh seafood, and most notably, its electrifying nightlife. Along its bustling streets, you'll find tantalizing street food stalls, relaxing massage parlors, lively bars, and discreet hourly motels. While the sex trade is technically illegal in Thailand, authorities often turn a blind eye, allowing this smokeless industry to flourish. Today, Pattaya is renowned as a red-light district, drawing millions of curious visitors from around the globe each year to experience its unique allure. But beneath this glitzy, vibrant facade, a horrific crime occurred just last week, shattering the festive atmosphere and exposing the dark underbelly of this tourist paradise. The central figure in today's tragic tale is Warren and Penichia, a resilient transgender woman from Thailand. Born in a tranquil northern village, Warren N was the youngest child in her family, with an older brother and sister. Old photos reveal that, before transitioning, Warren N was a slight, unassuming teenager. I couldn't find specific details about when Warren N decided to transition, but after embracing her true identity, she adopted the name Mina, a name affectionately used by those closest to her. After graduating high school, Mina opted not to pursue higher education. Instead, she studied Mandarin, dreaming of job opportunities in Taiwan. She spent 2 years working diligently on the picturesque island, saving a substantial sum. Upon returning to Thailand, Mina took up work in Pattaya, jobs that, given the city's reputation, you can likely imagine. To enhance her confidence in beauty, Mina underwent multiple cosmetic surgeries. She visited a Bangkok hospital at least 3 or 4 times, with her most recent procedure in January 2025. Mina's striking appearance earned her admiration from clients. Through relentless hard work, she saved at least 10,000 baht monthly, approximately $280. A devoted daughter, Mina avoided lavish spending, instead sending her savings to her parents' account, providing crucial financial support to her family. Thanks to Mina's tireless efforts, her parents built a comfortable home in their village, valued at 2 million baht, about $56,000. To her family and friends, Mina was kind-hearted, approachable, gentle, and polite. She cherished her family deeply, often sharing her dreams of saving enough to take them on trips to beautiful destinations like China and Europe. Tragically, no one could have foreseen that. Just after celebrating a joyful Songkran festival with her family in mid-April, a mere 10 days later, Mina would fall victim to a gruesome massacre that extinguished her dreams and hopes. On April 26, 2025, Pattaya police received an urgent call reporting the discovery of human body parts in a rented apartment in this coastal city. Officers rushed to room 201 on the second floor of the apartment complex. Though the room appeared clean and orderly at first glance, stepping into the bathroom revealed a horrifying scene, a nightmare that would likely haunt the officers for life. A person had been brutally dismembered. Through the testimony of a 61-year-old hotel cleaner who reported the crime, police gathered critical initial details. She recounted that between 1 and 2 a.m. on April 26th, while working on the first floor, she heard loud noises from above, followed by sounds of a struggle and a woman's desperate cries for help. Her instincts told her something was wrong, but fear held her back. She briefly considered calling the police, but hesitated, convincing herself it was just a lover's quarrel that would resolve itself. When the noises upstairs fell silent, the cleaner drifted into an uneasy sleep. Upon waking in the morning, still gripped by unease, she decided to report the incident to the hotel manager. When she and the manager opened room 201 under the pretense of a cleaning check, the ghastly scene in the bathroom left them both in shock. By reviewing the guest registry, police quickly identified the room's renter as Fu Tongyuan, a Chinese tourist. He had checked in the previous day, April 25th, paying 3,600 baht, about $100, for a 6-night stay. Fu Tongyuan, born in 1983 and now 42, hails from Hubei province and works as a welder with no prior criminal record. Immigration records show this was his 4th visit to Thailand. His first trip was with a tour group, but subsequent visits were solo, suggesting familiarity with Pattaya. Notably, he chose the same hotel for this stay as he had during previous visits. Security footage from the hotel captured Fu Tongyuan leaving the premises hours before the body was discovered, carrying a large backpack and a black plastic bag. His whereabouts afterward remain unclear for now. Recognizing Fu Tongyuan as the prime suspect and the risk of his fleeing Thailand, Pattaya police swiftly entered his details into their system and issued a nationwide manhunt. This straightforward yet effective measure paid off almost immediately. Just hours later, at 1:45 p.m. that same day, good news arrived from Suvarnabhumi International Airport. Fu Tongyuan attempted to pass through an automated security gate, but the police warrant triggered an alert. Visible scratches on his face further drew the attention of airport security, leading to his apprehension. Pattaya officers promptly arrived to escort him back to the station for interrogation. A swarm of reporters from various outlets gathered at the airport, cameras trained on the suspect. Facing a barrage of questions in Chinese and English, Fu Tongyuan remained silent, head bowed, offering no response. After completing necessary paperwork, police began interrogating him with the aid of on April 27, 2025, Fu Tongyuan, dressed in a discreet pink outfit, was escorted by heavily armed police to 4 key locations to reenact his crime. These locations were, first, the bus terminal where he arrived in Pattaya, second, a 20 baht fixed-price shop where he purchased the tools used in the crime, third, the beach near South Pattaya's walking street where he first met the victim, Mina, and finally, room 201 of the hotel, the site of the horrific crime. While following news coverage of the case, I wondered why Fu Tongyuan was made to wear a motorcycle helmet during the escort. The answer soon became clear. Overwhelmed by grief and rage, Mina's father could no longer contain himself. He suddenly rushed forward, striking Fu Tongyuan's head with a soda bottle. The helmet protected the suspect from injury, but the force of the swing caused the father to lose his balance and fall to the ground. During interrogation, Fu Tongyuan confessed that he had arrived in Thailand by plane 3 days before the crime on April 23, 2025. 2 days later, on April 25th, at 11:30 a.m., according to the timestamp on the hotel's exterior surveillance camera, which was 45 minutes behind, making the actual time 12:15 p.m., footage captured Fu Tongyuan strolling down the street, carrying a backpack and a plastic bag. After wandering for about 40 minutes, he returned to the hotel and checked in at 12:52 p.m., roughly an hour later. Around 1:50 p.m., Fu Tongyuan visited a nearby barber shop, where the surveillance camera's poor quality made identification difficult. Pointing to a male model's hairstyle posted on the wall, he told the barber, "Cut it like this." Reporters later interviewed the barber, who served Fu Tongyuan that day. She recalled that the customer requested a short trim on the sides while leaving the top untouched. After the haircut, before leaving, Fu Tongyuan used his phone's front camera as a mirror, carefully inspecting his new style from every angle. Satisfied, he paid 100 baht, about $2.80, and left. The barber also shared with reporters that she was familiar with Mina, the striking transgender woman. Mina and a few other girls frequently appeared in the area. A friend of Mina's, speaking to the barber after the crime, revealed that Fu Tongyuan had initially contacted another girl online, agreeing on a price of 5,000 baht, approximately $140. However, when he saw the girl's appearance via a video call, he was dissatisfied, noting a stark difference between her photos and reality. The girl promptly refunded the 5,000 baht he had paid up front. In hindsight, she was extraordinarily fortunate to escape tragedy. Leaving the barber shop, Fu Tongyuan returned to the hotel via a motorcycle taxi. He then visited a massage parlor next door, inquiring about beautiful girls. The female employee seemed to grasp his intent immediately, suggesting he try his luck in the nearby area. During their brief exchange, Fu Tongyuan occasionally glanced inside the parlor, perhaps contemplating a traditional Thai massage. Reporters also interviewed a small shop owner near Pattaya Beach, where Mina often spent time. The owner recalled seeing Mina and Fu Tongyuan talking on the afternoon of April 25th. As mentioned earlier, Mina had worked in Taiwan and was fluent in Mandarin, allowing seamless communication with Fu Tongyuan. The shop owner noted that Mina typically strolled the beach with 3 or 4 friends, primarily to attract tourists. Slender young women like Mina were particularly popular with visitors from Asian countries. During their conversation that afternoon, Mina and Fu Tongyuan showed no signs of conflict. After exchanging contact information, Fu Tongyuan left the beach. Based on this, police deduced that the two connected via WeChat at the agreeing on a price of 8,000 baht, about $224, for services at the hotel room, scheduled for later that night. At 9:14 p.m., hotel surveillance footage showed Fu Tongyuan leaving the premises, carrying only his mobile phone and now wearing a blue shirt instead of the white one from earlier. His destination was a nearby 20 baht fixed-price store. Just 9 minutes later, at 9:23 p.m., store cameras recorded him purchasing 6 items, 2 rainbow pattern bags of different sizes, several clear plastic bags measuring roughly 20 centimeters by 30 centimeters, 2 large black garbage bags, and the critical weapon in this case, a pair of scissors. Contrary to initial reports of yellow-handled scissors, the checkout footage clearly showed Fu Tongyuan buying curved blade scissors with 1 red handle and 1 yellow. The total cost was 348 baht, about $9.70, paid in cash. By 10:14 p.m., Fu Tongyuan returned to the hotel and called Mina to arrange her visit. Just past 11 p.m., he left the hotel again. At the same time, Mina arrived outside via motorcycle taxi. Exterior cameras captured Fu Tongyuan greeting her, and she followed him into the hotel. Together, they ascended to room 201 on the 2nd floor. What truly happened next in that fateful room? Based on police interrogations, the events of the crime can be summarized as follows. Past 11 p.m., Fu Tongyuan welcomed Mina into the room. They had communicated via WeChat and finalized the price at 8,000 baht. After Mina arrived, they undressed in the bathroom and showered. Afterward, Mina sat on the bed. She demanded payment, and Fu Tongyuan paid in cash. However, a dispute arose when Mina was uncooperative. During a struggle, she pushed Fu Tongyuan to the ground. A physical altercation ensued. Fu Tongyuan claimed he demanded half the money back and told her she could leave, but she refused. He said he felt cornered and attempted to force himself on her, which she fiercely resisted. In a fit of rage, Fu Tongyuan strangled Mina and struck her head with his elbow. When he realized she was no longer breathing, he dragged her body to the bathroom using both hands. He cleaned blood from himself and her body, then used a wet bedsheet to wipe blood from the floor. Using the scissors, he cut into the victim from her lower abdomen to near her throat. He removed her heart and placed it on her body. He also extracted 2 silicone implants, placing one on her left side and the other on her right. After the act, Fu Tongyuan washed blood from his hands, rested, and slept on the bed. He claimed that removing the heart and implants was an impulsive act, inspired by movies and driven by curiosity. He denied any intent to retaliate upon learning Mina was transgender, insisting he was unaware of this beforehand. After the crime, he booked a flight for just after 7 a.m. Despite the dismembered body nearby, he tried to rest on the bed, though he admitted to being terrified. He confessed to purchasing cable ties and plastic bags together, revealing that his intent in buying these items was to commit the crime. After brutally killing Mina, Fu Tongyuan claimed he briefly cleaned the crime scene before resting for a few hours. Around 7 a.m. on April 26th, he woke up and quickly purchased a flight ticket from Bangkok to Kunming, Yunnan Province, China. The flight, China Eastern Airlines MU-742, was scheduled to depart at 3:55 p.m. and land in Kunming at 7:25 p.m. that same day. After securing the ticket, at approximately 7:45 a.m., hotel surveillance footage captured Fu Tongyuan leaving the premises, a backpack slung over his shoulder and a black plastic bag in hand. He casually crossed the street to hail a taxi. At 7:53 a.m., he approached a roadside taxi driver, locals affectionately called Uncle Wanderer. The driver, startled by visible scratches on the stranger's face, assumed he had been in a recent fight. Fu Tongyuan, limited by his poor Thai, used his phone to show the destination and requested a ride. Uncle Wanderer, unable to understand Mandarin and already waiting for a pre-booked passenger, declined. Just then, a motorcycle taxi emerged from an alley. Uncle Wanderer waved the driver over and introduced Fu Tongyuan. After a brief haggle over the fare, at around 7:55 a.m., the motorcycle taxi whisked Fu Tongyuan away. Later, he told police the driver took him to Bell Travel Service in North Pattaya. There, he purchased a bus ticket to Suvarnabhumi Airport for 143 baht, about $4, and waited over half an hour for the 9 a.m. departure. At the airport, Fu Tongyuan lingered in the terminal. With his flight set for 3:55 p.m., he waited until about 2 hours before takeoff to attempt passing through the automated security gate, where he was promptly apprehended. In the wake of this horrific crime, Mina's family invited a revered local monk to room 201 to perform a blessing ceremony, hoping to guide her soul to peace in the afterlife. Per Thai tradition, the deceased should be laid to rest as soon as possible. The day after the crime, Mina's father, accompanied by a hearse, brought his daughter's remains back to their village. Heart-wrenching cries echoed through the small community as villagers condemned the killer's cruelty and expressed profound sorrow for the kind-hearted Mina's tragic fate. Some even loudly demanded the harshest legal penalty, death. For the temple monk had once predicted that, in her 60th year, she would face a calamity and lose something precious. In hindsight, she wondered if this tragedy was fated. Mina's father, his face etched with grief and eyes red from crying, told reporters he was consumed by sorrow and anger over the immense loss, but new life must go on. He was trying to accept this cruel outcome. He also revealed that police had returned Mina's mobile phone, but he hadn't yet found the strength to examine its contents. His priority was ensuring a proper funeral so Mina's soul could find eternal rest. This gruesome murder has become one of the most widely reported and shocking cases in recent Thai media. Some criticism has been directed at the hotel cleaner, with claims that had she acted decisively and called police that night, Mina might have survived. In fairness, however, her suspicion and subsequent report to the hotel manager the next morning played a pivotal role. Without her actions, Fu Tongyuan might have boarded his flight and escaped. Shortly after the crime, a TikTok video surfaced showing a group of transgender women discussing Mina's tragedy. Notably, one woman, Rita, was stunned to realize that a man who had contacted her days earlier for services was none other than Fu Tongyuan, the cold-blooded killer now dominating headlines. Rita felt both shocked and immensely fortunate for declining the transaction, as it could have been her, not Mina, who met a tragic end. The authenticity of Fu Tongyuan's alleged contact with Rita and the video's veracity, whether factual or a ploy for views, remains unconfirmed by authorities. I urge everyone to approach such information critically and cautiously. Regarding Fu Tongyuan's true motive for killing Mina, social media is rife with speculation. He claimed to police that during their transaction, Mina abruptly refused to continue, prompting him to demand a partial refund. When she refused, a physical altercation erupted, leading to the murder. However, based on available evidence, his account appears to be a blatant fabrication. First, Mina arrived at the hotel around 11 p.m., but 2 hours earlier, at 9 p.m., Fu Tongyuan had purchased scissors, cable ties, and plastic bags at a store, a clear indication of premeditated violence. When pressed by police, he shamelessly argued that these items were for daily use, even claiming the scissors were for self-defense. This absurd excuse is laughable. Who buys scissors for protection? Second, he stated at the scene that Mina had showered and lay on the bed. If she truly refused the service, would she have gone through those actions? A more plausible theory, based on the evidence, is that Fu Tongyuan initially didn't realize Mina was transgender. After she showered, he discovered this and attempted to back out of the transaction. Mina's refusal sparked a heated argument. While his purchase of crime tools suggests premeditation, other evidence indicates he may not have been fully committed to such a heinous act upon arriving in Thailand. First, he applied for a Thai tourist visa, TR type, which allows multiple entries and visits over 5 years, with stays up to 180 days each. As a Chinese citizen, he could have entered Thailand visa-free for 30 days. Applying for a long-term visa suggests he genuinely enjoyed Thailand and considered extended stays. If his sole intent was a depraved thrill-killing, a 30-day visa-free entry would have sufficed. No need for a complex visa. Second, he bought his flight ticket after killing Mina. Had he meticulously planned the crime, he likely would have secured a ticket in advance and fled immediately. His last-minute booking indicates either a lack of foresight, believing he wouldn't be caught so quickly, or that the murder was a spontaneous act. A central mystery in this case is the whereabouts of Mina's left lung. Official autopsy reports remain unpublished, but while her right lung was intact, her left lung was missing from the crime scene. This detail leaked to the media before Fu Tongyuan was brought to identify the scene. Police specifically asked Fu Tongyuan whether, beyond the silicone implants and heart, he removed any other organs. He insisted only those things. But reporters and the public remain skeptical. Wild rumors have since proliferated, each more sensational than the last. Some claim Fu Tongyuan admitted his crime was inspired by films and TV shows, leading to speculation that he knew of the infamous Jack the Ripper case, or had watched horror classics like The Silence of the Lambs. Given that he disemboweled the victim, many believe he may have emulated Dr. Hannibal Lecter and consumed Mina's left lung. Others point to surveillance footage showing Fu Tongyuan carrying a black bag when leaving the hotel for the airport, suspecting the lung was inside. Some even allege he was involved in organ trafficking, selling the lung on Thailand's black market. A widely circulated image of black market organ prices claims a human lung can fetch over 9 million baht, about 252,000 US dollars, surpassing the value of livers, kidneys, or eyes. Amid growing speculation, Thai police issued an official response regarding the missing lung. They confirmed that no human organs were found in Fu Tongyuan's backpack when he left for the airport. It contained only 2 bottles of mineral water, some clothes, personal items, Mina's phone, and approximately 80,000 baht, about 2,240 US dollars, in cash, far from the rumored 9 million baht. Given his 6-day hotel booking, this amount aligns with typical travel expenses. Police firmly stated that the case has no connection to organ trafficking. The investigation is ongoing, and official autopsy results will take over a month to release. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.